So today we're going to continue our exploration of the five skandhas, the five heaps or five aggregates. So last week we had a general introduction to the five skandhas, which will come up on our screens in a moment. So these five heaps are rupa or form, vijnana or consciousness, samnya or perception, Vedana, which is feeling tone, and samskara, which is volition. So last week we looked that the five skandhas encompass the whole of our experience of conditioned existence. We looked that they were conditioned, that we saw that all things arise in dependence upon conditions and upon the ceasing of which they cease. And we also saw that by understanding this conditioned nature of the five skandhas, we can free ourselves from suffering. So in a way, quite an important topic. And then we also looked at the qualities of form or rupa. So today we're going to look at vijnana or consciousness. We're not going to be looking at consciousness from a Western perspective, particularly, but a Buddhist perspective. And in Buddhism, Vijnana or consciousness crops up in quite a few lists. Some of you may be familiar with the 12 links of conditioned existence, which are represented on the Wheel of Life. And so you have birth linking consciousness. In later schools of Buddhism, there was a whole school of Buddhism called the Vijnana Vada or Chittamatra. It's a mind-only school which kind of related all our experience into consciousness, almost kind of a matrix film-like experience of the world. But today we're going to keep it quite simple and look at the six sense consciousnesses. So just a word about Vijnana. So it has two parts, Vi and Jnana. Some of you may be familiar with the word jnana in other contexts. In a Buddhist context, we have sometimes the five jnanas or the five wisdoms, which are the five kind of developed qualities of an awakened one. We're not going to talk about that. In this sense, jnana just means knowing or knowledge of. And vi can mean of or in. So it's just being aware of knowledge of what's going on, of cognizing what's going on through our senses. So last week we saw that some of the qualities of form were the five sense bases and their respective inputs. So we should have a list of the sense bases coming up now. So we have the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, body, and in Buddhism we add a sixth sense base of the mind. So with the eye, you've obviously got eye, and then you've got contact with visual stimuli. The ear, you've got sounds, nose, smell, tongue is taste, body is touch, and mind. Mind's a bit more complicated. Mind here is a translation of the word chitta. Some of you may be familiar with chitta. In Buddhism, we don't really have the dichotomy of heart-mind that we have in a more Western approach, that our mind is the rational and our hearts are the emotional. So chitta refers to both of them. So it can refer to our heart, our mind, it can refer to our thoughts, our emotions. So we've got these 6 sense bases. It's interesting from a more modern neuroscience stroke psychological point of view. There's a debate of actually how many senses we have. And I think it can be anywhere from 10 senses to 30 something. So one of the senses, which is proprioception, just a bit of a word, proprioception. It means spatial awareness. So we can all be aware of this sense. It's aware of where our body is in relationship to the rest of it. So if we just, you can do this yourself, you can just place your hand onto your ear. Okay, so that's proprioception. You've never actually, you can take your hand away if you're doing this now. You've never actually seen your ear directly. You can't see your hand when you do it, but you know where your hand and ear are and they come together. So that's proprioception. So that's one of these many modern senses. In a way, a lot of the additional senses of the body that they have come up with are a form of awareness of the body sense, the sense of touch, the sense of what's going on internal. So yeah, we have these 6 senses in Buddhism. Sometimes in modern thought, consciousness is this kind of overarching kind of awareness. But in Buddhism, we've got these 6 separate senses, which will come up now. You can probably guess what the consciousnesses are. So we've got eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue, you could say the whole of the mouth in terms of taste consciousness, consciousness of the body, and consciousness of mind in the sense of heart and mind, our kind of rational side on our emotional side. And it's quite interesting, even from a neurological point of view, each of these consciousnesses has its own base within the brain. So eye consciousness, our processing of the visual stimuli, is quite a big center at the back of the brain, and you have ear consciousness around here, and so on. So it's quite reasonable to just think of the 6 consciousnesses as separate, because they are processed differently. In a way, that's all there is to the skandha of Vijnana, the heap or aggregate of Vijnana. It's the 6 sense bases and being conscious, having knowledge of what's going on within them, or or through them. So that could be the shortest Saturday morning talk ever. But there's also the aspect of the conditioned nature of consciousness, of the 6 consciousnesses. So we're just going to explore this a little bit more. I'm going to explore it in a more experiential way. So for this, you probably want to be sitting comfortably. And we're just going to go through the senses in a little bit more detail than we normally would. And we're going to notice how things change. So we'll start with the eye consciousness. So part of what's happening at the moment is you're looking at a screen. So there's a consciousness of that looking. And then maybe we can look away from the screen and look at the surroundings of the screen. Maybe your screen's on a table. Maybe you can look at your hand. Bring your hand up, or you can look at your hand. So our eye consciousness is constantly changing. We could look at something up towards the ceiling. And we could look down towards the floor. So what we're actually conscious of is changing, and it arises in dependence upon conditions, and it ceases. So when we're looking at the floor, we're no longer conscious of looking at the ceiling because it's moved on. It's kind of obvious, but sometimes we just need to experience this, and just notice our experience of eye consciousness is always changing. So likewise, we can bring our attention to ear consciousness, so sound. So the most obvious sound at the moment is my voice talking about the ear consciousness. So we can become aware of that. You may also be aware of when there isn't any sound. If I held that too long, you'd probably get an emotional response of, has its internet connection or has my internet connection gone? And we can be aware of the sounds in our environment. So there may be sounds in the building that you're currently in. So if there are, we're just aware of that. There may be sounds from outside, maybe the sound of traffic, of birds, of the wind. Other sounds of life around us that just arise in dependence upon conditions and cease. It's just sounds. Or lack of sounds. So what's arising and falling away to our sense consciousnesses, our ear consciousness, is dependent upon conditions, and a lot of that has got nothing to do with us. If a car goes by, that's just a car going by. So likewise, we can be aware of the nose consciousness, sense of smell. So just focus in on the sense of smell. Maybe an absence, and maybe you have a drink in front of you and you can smell the drink. And maybe other smells around you, maybe a smell of soap on the skin. Maybe there's some flowers nearby, you can smell flowers, or incense. Or maybe the smell consciousness isn't really picking up anything. And that may change. And then we come on to the taste consciousness, sense of taste in our mouth. If you're having a drink or just had a drink, there'll be a taste of that drink. Maybe just had something to eat, and maybe a residual taste of that in the mouth we're aware of. There may be an absence of any strong taste. We can be aware of that. So again, what we're aware of arises in dependence on conditions and falls away. We can move on to the sense of the body. So maybe we can feel the feet in contact with the floor or chair or with socks or something. You have sensations of the feet. Then bring your awareness to the hands. You're aware, conscious of the hands, sensations in the hands. You can be aware of the head, the tactile sensations of the skin, shape of the head. So as we move our awareness around the body, our consciousness of the body is constantly changing. So you may want to be aware of the movement of the rib cage. We breathe in and out. So as we do that, we're probably not aware or very less aware of the sensations of the feet. You may be aware of the sensations of the heart. Maybe aware of the sensations around the digestive tract, the stomach, the intestines. So our experience of the body consciousness is changing all the time, depending on what we're paying attention to. So it arises in dependence upon conditions, and then it falls away, and a new set of conditions arise. And we're going to bring our awareness to the mind consciousness. It's probably easier to do this with the eyes closed. It's almost like we're taking a step back from the mind, from the heart mind, and you're just observing what's going on. Sometimes when we start doing this, nothing happens. The mind stops thinking, and it's just blank, in which case that's still an experience, the consciousness of what's going on in the mind. Sometimes we'll get thoughts arise. Sometimes we may be planning of what we're going to be doing later. Sometimes we're remembering something that's already happened. So we just want to sit quietly with the mind consciousness, seeing what arises and then passes away. And something else arises and passes away. So this is the mind consciousness. Again, it's conditioned. And then we can just revolve around the different consciousnesses and just see how one takes dominance over the other. So we can be aware of the eye consciousness, what's visible in front of us. We can then flick to the mind consciousness, our internal experience. Go to the touch consciousness, maybe a particular part of the body we're more aware of. To the ear consciousness. Back to the mind consciousness. We just go round the different consciousnesses. As we pay attention, our experience changes. So as we change our attention between the consciousnesses, so the predominance of that consciousness changes. So it arises in dependence upon conditions, and upon the ceasing of which they cease. So as we're aware of this experience, you may just want to contemplate the words the Buddha spoke to Bahia. And he said to Bahia, "In the seen, only the seen. In the heard, only the heard. In the sense, only the sense. In the cognized, only the cognized." Just read that again. In the seen, only the seen. In the heard, only the heard. In the sense, only the sense. In the cognized, only the cognized. So that in a way just sums up the skandha of consciousness. It's just a heap. It's just a flow of experience. We see, we hear, we taste, we smell, we touch, we cognize. And all of that's conditioned. So I'll leave you with that as a thought.